Hello again, I'm Jake, and welcome back to my lounge. So I'm really excited, I'm a little bit nervous. This is my first musician spotlight. So when I had the idea that I was going to go ahead and do a YouTube channel, I knew that musician spotlights were going to be a big part of that, and telling the stories of how I love a certain artist or band's music and my experience with them. And I knew immediately that Willie Nelson would be the first one. So if you saw my previous video that's explaining why I'm doing these and how I'm selecting them, I talk about favorites and I struggle with that. But I think the argument could be made, if you looked at my collection, that Willie Nelson is my favorite artist overall. I also own more Willie Nelson albums than any other artist. I've got 25, and we're going to talk about those today. So bear with me. I'm still trying to figure out how the best way to make these presentations, but hopefully you can kind of just see the excitement that I have for some of this music. And this is really pretty hard. I've already got about 6 hours or so preparing this. I thought I would just sit down with my albums and just kind of freestyle, narrate the whole thing. And as you're taking time preparing, you realize, whoa, that's not going to come across very good. I need some more organization in this presentation, and then you get lost on all that. So bear with me. I actually have a impromptu teleprompter here in front of me that I'm going to be referencing. I know I'm going to forget some things as I go through this, and whatever. We'll just dive right in and have some fun. So, Willie Nelson. I'm 44 years old. Growing up through the 80s and 90s, you knew who Willie Nelson was, whether you were a fan or not. He was just that big. Of course, songs like On the Road Again were ubiquitous in the country music scene. So in the early 2000s, I had a friend, his name was Preston Colston. I wanted to give him a shout out because he really turned me on to becoming the fan that I am. And as we were talking, he's like, I think you would really like Willie Nelson. I think you should check him out. Well, maybe there's more to his music catalog than I've been made aware. It wasn't long after that Willie was actually performing at a local county fair. So it was August of 2003, and I had to look that up because I knew it was a long time ago. Willie came to the Weber County Fair. We went to that concert, and it was in kind of a livestock show arena. So there was benches all around, and then a dirt floor. It was an open air arena. And they had oversold this thing big time. So we could not find a seat, and they weren't allowing anybody on that dirt floor. So eventually the organizers realized, well, gosh, we got to get this concert started. People are standing everywhere. Let's just let them come down onto the dirt floor, even though they hadn't planned for that. Make an announcement over the PA, whoever can come on down, come on down. So we had to climb over the railings and drop in onto that dirt floor. Concert was fantastic. It was a lot of fun. It was a mix of old people who were taking up all the benches, and then the youngins. We got down there and we just had a party. Got a little crazy. Got to see a Weber County sheriff in a 10-gallon cowboy hat chase down a guy that was a little intoxicated or who knows what else, and fly half through the air and tackle this guy, and they took him out. It kind of amped up the energy of the concert, quite honestly. But one of the things that really caught my eye during that concert was Willie could wail on that guitar. I mean, when you hear the music, if you're not really paying attention, you just think it might be basic chords and strumming and things like that. Not at all. Willie can really pick on that guitar. And we'll talk a little bit more about Trigger in a second, what little I know. It was kind of funny, about a month ago, I listened to Conan O'Brien's Conan Needs a Friend podcast from time to time, and Willie Nelson was on there, as he's just had recently released an album. And Conan himself is a bit of a guitar player, but one thing that Conan was joking with Willie about is he's a much better guitar player than he needs to be. And that kind of caught me off guard, and Willie went on to talk more about his history with learning guitar and what inspired him that's a great episode, and it was very funny. And if you're a fan of either or one of them or both of them, check out that podcast. It was a lot of fun. So, Willie has been a significant influence as a songwriter and a collaborator since 1962. And the stories of his efforts to break into country music are pretty inspiring. It wasn't easy. And I recommend you dig into his biography about that time in Nashville and those connections he made and what got him to break through and those transitions of his career. Again, I cannot do an all-encompassing treatment of Willie Nelson, his career. In fact, you'd probably get bored for me listening to me for a few hours if you aren't bored already. And by the way, Willie Nelson turns 88 next month, the end of April. And he's still very productive. We're going to talk about the album they just released. He's got more things in the works. He's got a book coming out. It's pretty inspiring. And most people, when they think of Willie Nelson, they think of hard living, marijuana use. Got this. When did this thing come out? This episode, I'm not seeing the date on here. Oh, here we go. May of 2019 was this episode, or this magazine came out. It's a fun read. But he's got this longevity going where so many of his counterparts through the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, they've passed. We'll talk a little bit about that. He's very aware of that in some of these more recent albums that he's put out. I've been able to see Willie in concert many times. I've traveled a little bit to see him and his son Lucas. I went down to Vegas a couple years ago. This was at the Red Butte Gardens. This was a really good concert. I'm not sure that Willie will be coming back to Utah much. All of the concerts I've seen here have been outdoor venues with our altitude. His most recent concert didn't treat him too well and was cut quite short. And our dry altitude environment was kind of to blame for that. Anyways, okay, so let's talk about these albums that I have, some of my experiences with them. Some of them I'm going to kind of skip through pretty quickly. So Willie's got like 95 studio albums and a bunch of collaborative albums, greatest hits, things like that. So it's kind of a mixture. I do not own all of his albums, and I never will. I have to be selective with the number of albums that I'm going to collect. And there are a lot of other artists that I have interest in, but it would take up a lot of space if all you had was Willie Nelson albums. So, let's jump right on in. Willie and Family Live. This was the first Willie Nelson vinyl that I ever purchased. Or I think I got this, I'm trying to remember if I got this at a Goodwill store or something. The sleeve is a little rough, but the record itself, there's 2 LPs in here. Are in great shape. So if you've been to a Willie Nelson concert, there's a lot of energy to them. This was recorded back in '78, so there would have been even more energy at the time. Back up in Lake Tahoe, I think Harrah's Casino. There's about 33 tracks on here. This really delivers a good sense of a live music experience. You can hear the crowd, of course. Actually, one thing that I enjoy about this is they play Whiskey River twice. And I don't know if that was on purpose or if the whiskey was really flowing that day. But they play it on the first one and then side 4. The side 1 and then side 4 again. It pops up. And it's just always kind of made me laugh. But like that album. These are not at all in chronological order. Somewhat in the order of how I purchased them, a little bit of chronological order. It's just a mixed bag. Many people are surprised to see Willie in his early days of his career. He's clean shaven, didn't have the braids, the bandanas, anything like that. This is really how Willie started off. This album is kind of a greatest hits. So some of the big songs, Hello Walls, I believe, was the big song that got him some attention. He didn't record it originally. He had Farron Young record it originally, but Willie's performed it many times over the years. funny how time slips away and more. It's great to listen to, and even the changes in his voice. Obviously, some of these songs were recorded 60 years ago, and it's fun to go back in time on some of those recordings. Okay. Always on My Mind. I think this was the second one that I acquired. It was actually his 27th studio album. Merle Haggard actually had the opportunity to record Always on My Mind with him, but he was not interested. And so, as Willie said, we'll never know what would have happened if Merle had really heard that song the way Willie heard it. It really kind of, it knocked him over, is the way he stated it the first time he heard it, and that's why he picked it as one of his songs to record. He's also got Bridge Over Troubled Water on this one, a Paul Simon song, and Wider Shade of Pale. I really like that recording also. Okay, Pretty Paper. So I think I was scrolling Facebook a few years ago, and this came up in an ad. I didn't know that Willie Nelson had a Christmas album. Another gatefold, a couple cool concert pictures there. If you love Christmas music and you love country music, this is a great album to have. This was kind of a collector's pressing. It's got some green splotches in there with the yellow vinyl, or gold, whatever you want to call it. This gets a lot of play during Christmas time. You could really listen to that if it wasn't Christmas time. It fits in with everything that he does. Okay. Somewhere Over the Rainbow. Came out in 1981. Some of the early days, or that 70s, 80s photography just seems a little bit more impromptu, not as well staged as these later albums. But Mona Lisa is a great song that he does. I believe that was the first time that was. And then of course Over the Rainbow, you've got a little picture there, reminiscent of the Wizard of Oz. Fun album. I'm going to be pretty repetitive about it's a great album, it's a fun album. They're all great. For me, Willie Nelson, there's almost nothing that he's done that I don't enjoy. I can go along for the ride with anything that he's involved in. It just clicks with me. Minstrel Man, this was given to me by my brother-in-law. It's a compilation album from 1981. This has, you can kind of match this up, but you see this notch in the spine that goes over that barcode. So my understanding on that is the album was released, it went to a record store, it didn't sell, it was returned to distributor or the record company or whoever, and that was the way to mark that it didn't sell at the record store initially. So it'd be redistributed and put into discount bins and stuff. I don't know that any song in particular stands out to me, but yeah, a compilation album. Just the picture's kind of cool, some good artwork. Okay, this was also given to me by my brother-in-law. It just kind of makes me laugh. This is in the original shrink wrap, and then it's got that sticker. I've got several albums like that. I love seeing that. This came out in '76. This particular album is in really good shape. What's interesting to me on this is Willie has side one from a few songs, 1959 to 1962, but side two, Willie doesn't have anything to do with it. You've got 2 songs by David Allan Coe, 2 from Jerry Lee Lewis, and 2 from Carl Perkins, and they're awesome. So my favorite part of this album actually isn't Willie, it's those guys, and it's a lot of fun to listen to. I like the black and white photo. Looks probably towards the tail end of the concert. And it looks like they had a really good time. But that is a fun one. And easy to get too. That's not hard to find that. Okay. One of the things that's great about being in this hobby of collecting vinyl is you're easy to buy gifts for. So your birthday and Christmas and whatever holidays else you celebrate, people, there's always an album that you're interested in. So it's an easy, you're an easy buy. So my mother-in-law purchased this a couple of years ago. Willie and Merle Haggard, Django and Jimmy. It's a gatefold. It's got a really cool picture inside. You have to assume that this was a scene that played out many, many times over the years. I've been told Willie Nelson really enjoys poker, and they've got a few $100 bills there in the middle. And you can imagine the type of post-concert shenanigans that took place. This is a fun album. This is actually the last time Merle Haggard recorded anything, and then he passed away. It's All Going to Pot is a lot of fun. Jamie Johnson jumps in on that one, and then they sing a tribute song, Missing Old Johnny Cash. I enjoy that. Bobby Bear's involved there. It's just a really sweet album between people that were, two guys that were really good friends and had a long career together. And I want to say this was the 6th time that they collaborated on an album. It sounds great too. It's a very well mixed album. Okay, Honeysuckle Rose. So first off, I've not seen this movie. I'm not necessarily interested in seeing the movie. Willie's a great artist and singer-songwriter. Not so much an actor, but it's still a really fun album to have. The artwork's fantastic. Now, I'm sure I'll get around to watching the movie. It just, the opportunity hasn't quite presented itself. This is where we get on the road again. It won, I believe, an Oscar for original song on a soundtrack that year. Emmylou Harris is in it, which is really cool. I've really enjoyed Emmylou Harris and the longevity of her career, and I got to see her perform a couple years ago. But Honeysuckle Rose, this one, I'm not sure where I got this either. Some of these, some you can remember, some stick in your mind, some don't. This is a greatest hits album. It's in actually incredible shape. I think also my brother-in-law may have gotten this one for me. Really cool picture of Willie rocking a tank top and some red New Balances, like you do as a country superstar. This came out in '81, had a bunch of songs from '75 to '81, but everything Willie Nelson is famous for is on this album. If you're trying to cut some corners, that's a good album to have to kind of condense things. Okay, Waylon and Willie. So this is actual leather work that was done, and then they took a picture of it. It wasn't done graphically, so somebody actually tooled all that leather. But of course, another person that Willie has a great history with, many years together, I'm sure, and many incredible stories to share. I just listened to this actually as I was preparing this presentation. It's a lot of fun. Mamas Don't Let Your Babies Grow Up to Be Cowboys. Probably the most well-known song on there. Okay, so this album, what caught my ear was Hesitation Blues, which is a song that's been around for quite some time. But this is a bit of a departure. One of the things I really enjoy about Willie Nelson is he's willing to explore different genres. One album I'm looking to get my hands on, and I think they'll probably reissue it at some point, is his reggae album, Countryman. It's going for about $100 on Discogs right now. I've had that on MP3 years ago, listened to it all the time. I'll get it eventually. This is probably the one that is kind of my next in line. But this is kind of Americana. I was going to describe it almost like bluegrass, but it's not quite that bluegrass. This is a happy, fun album. You can't help but have a good time listening to this album. And it's really pretty artwork, too. I think Ray Benson, who I've seen in a lot of documentaries, he's got a long history in the country music world, is a big part of this. Just a lot of fun. Okay, Stardust. This is a big album. It came out in 1978. Those late 70s, early 80s were really big for Willie. He made some really important albums. So you've got Stardust and Georgia on My Mind, Blue Skies. This is a fun album that I believe, if I'm quoting correctly, so Jody Payne was a guitarist for Willie for many, many years. And talking about it, he was almost most proud of this album and the work that they had done on Stardust. It was actually on the Billboard country music charts for like 10 or 11 years. And then in 2015, the Grammy Hall of Fame it got put in the Grammy Hall of Fame class of 2015. So lots and lots of albums of Stardust were sold. Okay, Willie Nelson, another compilation album, another Notch album, actually. Biggest thing that I enjoy about this one, his song Me and Paul. Paul English was a drummer for many years, and it sounds like they enjoyed getting themselves into a bit of mischief, and so they wrote a song about that, Me and Paul. And check out that song if you haven't heard it. It's a lot of fun. Okay, Partners, another album that's in the original shrink wrap and still has that sticker. I wish you could easily buy good condition albums for $7 these days. Not his most well-known album. It's got he covers Heart of Gold by Neil Young, which is a good version, good rendition of it. What's interesting, so you've got on side 2, they do Something in the Way She Moves. So you've got, and I didn't know this, but what caught my eye was, when I saw that, I'm thinking, okay, that's Beatles, it's George Harrison. So you've got something, but the title of that song is just Something. It's credited to James Taylor. So I look into that, I'm like, why did James Taylor write a Beatles song? James Taylor wrote a song titled Something in the Way She Moves. George Harrison liked that line so much, he asked if he could use that. So he wrote the song all of us know, Something in the Way She Moves, but it's just titled Something. Willie used the James Taylor title, but sings the George Harrison version. I don't know if that's a great mystery to everybody, but if somebody knows the answer of how that all worked out, let me know. Hopefully I explained that well. Okay. Willie and the Boys, Willie Nelson and the Boys, Willie Stash Volume Number 2. So Willie Stash Volume Number 1 was just focused on him and his sister Bobby, who's a couple years older than her. I'm a big fan of Lucas Nelson, and that'll be another episode altogether, although I don't have this many albums of his. Not everything is on vinyl that I've been able to get a hold of. But anyways, so I immediately saw that and thought, okay, I'm going to buy it. This is such a fun album. Now, you've also got Micah, who's the younger brother. Now, Willie was 55 and 57 years old when these guys were born. I'm 44. The thought of me having 2 more kids in 11 or 13 years is utterly terrifying. And it's also not going to happen. But Willie had 8 kids over his lifetime. But not only to have kids at that age, but to have them come up and become very skilled and successful musicians and just follow right in Willie's path. I mean, how has that ever happened with any other musician that you can think of? I couldn't think of one. There might be somebody. Buddy Cannon, and we'll talk a bit more about Buddy Cannon. He produced this album. He puts in some liner notes. I really appreciate when they do that. Many of these albums have some liner notes that give you a little bit of history of what went on when they recorded the album. Wikipedia is not necessarily the best source for that I've run into. So some of the questions I ended up with by preparing this were not answered through the internet. But what caught my eye was, I would just read this last paragraph. Aside from Lucas and Micah's vocal additions, there were no overdubs added. None on Willie's vocals or Trigger, his guitar. I distinctly remember locking eyes with Willie that night with holy shit smiles on our faces. It was all it was just all that excitement and fun. That's exactly, I mean, before I even read the liner notes, I felt the same way. They sing such songs as Move It On Over, Mind Your Own Business, Can I Sleep in Your Arms, and Send Me the Pillow You Dream On. They blend so well, and it's so simple, but it just delivers a very fun, sincere album. I can't talk about it enough. In fact, this might be the album I listened to first after recording this. Really great. Okay. So speaking of Buddy Cannon, I do not know how many albums he produced, but like the next 7 albums I'm going to show here, he was the producer, and he co-wrote a lot of the songs that are on here as well. So starting with Band of Brothers in 2014, and the next several albums, for me there was just such a similar sound, which would make sense because Buddy Cannon was the producer. But they just kind of seem to blend in so well together. Willie's very reflective. Like I said, I mean, he's in his 80s, for heck's sakes, when he's producing this much material, and original material, and amazing material. I think you could argue for a lot of bands that after 30 and 40 years, the stuff they're coming out with just isn't so great. I'm not going to name any names. For me, he still got what he had back in the 70s and 80s and throughout his whole career. There's just so much consistency. And so you've got Band of Brothers, title track is good. I also like the artwork, and you'll see that, I mean, a little bit more artistic than some of those earlier albums we were talking about. So we got Band of Brothers, God's Problem Child, Still Not Dead. That actually made it into some of his concert rotations. Willie's concerts, it's a pretty static song list, but he'll sprinkle in a few new ones. But Still Not Dead Today. I woke up still not dead again today. The internet said I had passed away. If I died, I wasn't dead to stay, and I woke up still not dead again today. He wrote that with Buddy Cannon. I think I've seen even a couple of internet rumors that pop up that Willie Nelson had passed away, which every time I've seen that, I stop and have to catch my breath for a second. He's willing to kind of poke fun of himself. He's very self-aware. Then we go on to Last Man Standing. Again, I love the artwork on it, or the photography. And you get a little bit more of that, Last Man Standing. Among all of his counterparts, Willie's kind of the last man standing. Like I said, he's almost going to be 88 years old. I just hope I can be that vibrant at that age. I'm not thinking my chances are as good. Then we've got Ride Me Back Home. This is a gatefold. On the inside of that is a shot of Luck, Texas, which I believe is on his property down in Texas. Micah and Lucas jump in and sing with him a song, It's Hard to Be Humble. And it's just really well done. It's tongue-in-cheek. But it all works. The whole thing flows. All of these albums. I can just listen to them end to end. Okay. We're getting to our last few albums here. So this First Rose of Spring, this was supposed to come out last spring. The COVID pandemic kind of threw a wrench in a lot of things. So it came in, I can't remember, later, a few months later, I think in July. Anyways, so Barnes & Noble. So you've got Barnes & Noble and you've got like Target. They'll get kind of their limited edition versions of these albums. And I wanted the Barnes & Noble because the vinyl is this, I guess, rose colored, more strawberry, and I did not pre-order it. So the day that it became available, I hop online and it was not available. I went to my local Barnes & Noble down the street. They didn't know what I was talking about, but they didn't have it, and I finally found a copy down in Salt Lake, and I called my mother-in-law, and explained my plight, what I was dealing with. And she said, I'm going to help you out. So she hopped in her car, ran to the closest Barnes & Noble to her, and they had the last copy in the area, and I got it. Again, Buddy Cannon produced it. It's fun. It's good. It mostly covers on here. We've got Blue Star, which was Buddy Cannon and Willie Nelson wrote. Toby Keith song, a Chris Stapleton song, our song. I've really enjoyed it. I was happy to still generating great music. Okay, so Barnes & Noble again. So Willie Nelson, this just barely came out. He did a My Way, a tribute, I think, a year or so ago to Frank Sinatra, and then this is a follow-up to that with That's Life. Again, in Barnes & Noble. I pre-ordered this time. I learned my lesson. It's on a blue, kind of marbled vinyl. I've become more interested in Frank Sinatra. I recently watched a documentary on his life. I learned a lot of things. I learned that he had a real downtime in his career where he kind of was forgotten about, and then he had this incredible comeback. So I've purchased a few Sinatra albums that I've been listening to that are just tremendous. What a mood you can be in on a Saturday night and just throw on some Sinatra. Willie brings his delivery to those Sinatra songs. They knew each other. I believe they knew each other quite well. He does a duet with a really cute video with Diana Krall. That got a lot of, was passing around the internet quite a bit. But you got Luck Be a Lady, Wee Small Hours in the Morning, Got You Under My Skin. It's well done. Okay. Just a couple more albums to go. So, a year and a half ago, we went to an incredible concert, something I'll talk about on another episode, in Nashville. I'd never been to Nashville. And on Nashville, on Broadway, there's Ernest Tubbs Record Store. It's not a big record store, very historical. It's no bigger than my record store, Lavender Vinyl, here in Ogden on 25th Street. But I came across an ad. Now, this is an album that I've been looking for a little while. And I saw on Facebook it was a 20% off coupon that day to buy something on Ernest Tubbs' website. And I kind of like buying from record stores like that around the country. It just kind of, it's fun for me. And so I hop on there, and this album was there. I'm like, are you kidding? I've been looking for it. I had no idea that it was coming available. And it was a limited edition. They only, supposedly, they only did 1,000 of these. I got number 14. I clicked on it and got to the checkout as fast as I possibly could because I knew I had to have this album. So it's a gatefold. This is an incredibly glossy album. I'm sure you can see how shiny this thing is. I've already got my fingerprints all over it. I think there's a company, Music on Vinyl. They get the licensing and then do these limited editions. Trying to remember. Oh, it's a really odd color, and I don't know how they chose it, but it's this dark, solid green, forest green. I'm not sure what type of a green. There's obviously a name for it on both of them. Man, this thing sounds good, and there's a lot of, one thing I wanted to mention is there's a lot of bass in some of these more recent Willie Nelson recordings. There's a lot of bass. My system really wakes up and you're like, oh my gosh, why is there so much bass in this Willie Nelson country music? But there is. Anyways, Heroes. A lot of duets, a lot of fun songs on here. The whole thing is an absolute riot. A Horse Called Music with Merle Haggard. My kids, they don't believe me, but one way or another, Roll Me Up and Smoke Me When I Die will be played at my funeral. On this one, he does it with Snoop Dogg, Jamie Johnson, and Chris Christopherson. No Place to Fly with Lucas. Lucas does a few duets, the most famous of which is they covered Just Breathe by Pearl Jam. that got a lot of attention when that came out, and the music video is really cool. They're driving down in an old convertible singing that song. Come On Up to the House. Now, I'm a Tom Waits fan, and maybe you've seen in the previous video, I've got a lot of Tom Waits. I love Tom Waits. I first heard Come On Up to the House was this version with Sheryl Crow and Willie Nelson, and I loved it, listened to it many, many times. I had this MP3 originally. I didn't know it was a Tom Waits song, and then I got back into Tom Waits, and then that song popped up, and it's a beautiful version. They do a great job. The Sound of Your Memory, which is a Willie Nelson original, and Willie collaborated. They've done it a couple of times, I think. Beautiful version of that. Just Breathe. Come On Back, Jesus is a lot of fun, and it's a lot of fun. Then The Scientist, which was a Coldplay song. Now, when I'm looking at the bottom of this, it says, 2012 Sony Music Entertainment, and then 2011 Chipotle Mexican Grill, under license from Chipotle Mexican Grill. I'm like, what does Chipotle have to do with Willie Nelson? I had no idea Chipotle was in the music business. So I dive into it. Apparently, The Scientist was a collaboration with Chipotle to deliver a message about ethically raising pork. And so there's a video that they did. It's kind of interesting where this version of The Scientist is performed by Willie, and then Chipotle kind of put out that message. Look it up. It's kind of interesting. But that's how Chipotle is involved in this album. Fantastic album. Amazing album. Okay. Now, if you've stuck with me this long and you are a Willie Nelson fan, you're probably like, is this guy ever going to talk about Redheaded Stranger? So, this is a repress. You can see, I mean, it's fairly brand new. This is not an original copy at all. Redheaded Stranger. So a concept album. This, from what I understand, really blew things up for Willie Nelson. Now, he had just gotten to, I believe, Capitol Records. Let me refer to my notes here. And I don't think I've got it on there. So anyways, he'd just gone to Capitol Records, and part of the deal with his contract is he had full creative control. Redheaded Stranger is pretty minimalistic with his instrumentation. So when he took it to the executives, they're like, okay, that's a pretty good demo. Yeah, let's do the full-blown album. And Willie said, that is the album. That's exactly what I want. Unfortunately, in his contract, he was in charge. So he put this album out, and Redheaded Stranger has gone down in his history as one of the great concept albums. You know, you can pick out some songs that are your favorites, but really, this is intended as it's a story of a man that kills his wife and her lover. And just like Dark Side of the Moon, it's intended to be listened to as an album. So this is one that hangs up on my wall. I'll probably swap it out. Honestly, the Heroes album might get up on my wall so I can look at it for a little bit, but Redheaded Stranger. If you like Willie Nelson, if you love Willie Nelson, you've got to have that. Okay, now again, back to the word favorite. I don't like the word, but I've already conceded to probably allowing Willie to be my favorite artist. And if I've got to pick a favorite album, it's Spirit. I'm not a religious guy, but I'm a spiritual guy, and there's so much of that. Willie wrote these songs, and he produced this album. Buddy Cannon did not produce this one. It's a gatefold. This probably is I don't know if this might be the most enjoyed cover, preferred cover of all of his albums. There's just so much going on there. Even if you didn't know Willie Nelson, you'd never heard of him, just looking at the face, the expression on his face, he's wearing a large hat, he's got that bandana, he's got long hair. The face tells a story. Now, you get a lot more of that story if you appreciate his career. This was on a beeswax pressing. This was the same situation as Heroes. I wanted the album on vinyl. I couldn't find it. It wasn't available. And then one day, just out of pure luck, I was on, I think Amazon or something. This is supposedly is a 2,500 unit run of this pressing, and just my timing was right. I immediately bought it. It's been on my wall ever since. And then of this song, We Don't Run is my favorite Willie Nelson song. We Don't Run is just such a good message, and it's just my favorite. Very basic, very simple, much like Redheaded Stranger. I absolutely love this album, and if you listen to it, I think you'd be able to see why. Okay, so I was saving this for last and for a reason. I'm actually going to unbox this. So as I was preparing this presentation, it occurred to me I'm missing an album that I used to really love. I also had this on MP3. And it's Willie Nelson, Country Music. It's a double LP. It's mostly just covers on here. This is kind of a tribute to classic country music. A lot of these songs have been redone by several artists over the years. Standouts for me are Dark as a Dungeon, a song about coal mining. Some really good bass on that, actually, speaking of bass. And then Satisfied Mind. Again, that's a song that could probably be played at my funeral. Should all go well. But this album, so as I was preparing this, I thought, man, I wonder if I can get that and what's that going to look like. So I went on to Discogs, I found this. It's originally sealed. So talk about interesting businesses in the music industry. Apparently Cracker Barrel likes to sell records, at least some of them anyways. And this is a sealed copy. I've seen some editions like this going for $100. I did not pay that. I got a very fair deal from the seller on Discogs. And let's open this. I didn't buy this thing to stare at it. I'm going to listen to it. So let's unbox this and check it out. I don't know if the vinyl is colored or if it's just black. Now, the reason I'm splitting it like this is because it's a gatefold. So I'm going to I don't know if I'm going to keep the shrink wrap on this one. I might slide the sticker for Cracker Barrel on the inside somewhere, because that's kind of funny. Well, there we go. It's gatefold. I didn't know that was the picture on the inside. That's a great shot of trigger. Let's open this up. So we've got another picture of Willie in concert. Okay, your standard black vinyl. Oh, then we've got a close-up of the band as well as trigger. My gosh, that thing is beat to heck. That's a Martin guitar that they've amplified. I don't know what the story of that giant gaping hole is, but I'm sure there's a good one. I'll have to look that up. I'll be listening to this album later today. So that's my Willie Nelson collection. I want to hear from you. What are your favorite Willie Nelson songs or albums? What did I miss? What should I be aware of? You know, and I hope Willie has continues to be able to be productive to the very end. And like I said, he's 88 next month. What a fantastic career, and I'm so glad I've been able to enjoy it. So that's it for now. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you next time.